buy at market order for 6.5 million ounces of gold, which is what they bought. All they would do is they would succeed certainly in running up the price, okay, to God knows what level, but they would have a difficult time in accumulating merchandise. The idea is when you're buying, you want to buy it as low as possible, okay, the best price possible. So the big buyers in gold have a problem too. These central banks have so much money, okay, in order to go into the gold market. Their problem is it's not a bad problem, but it's a problem is finding a large and ready seller, okay, on the other side of the transactions. You can't buy in a void. You can't sell in a void. So there has to be this matchup, and I would think that could be a pretty difficult thing to do.
I also talked with Pierre this week, and I'm going to hit you with this, Ted. I'm just curious as to your thoughts on it. But consolidation in the sector, because 50 to 60%, I think Pierre was saying, of the development projects that actually will end up going into production are really started and founded and run by these junior exploration companies. There's no money going into these. There hasn't been any for quite some time. So there's no drills being turned for the last 18 months or so. And I was asking Pierre, is this a crisis? And he said, well, if gold was cheaper, it really would be a train wreck, because you would have this tremendous decrease essentially in production. But the fact that gold is up here, they're able to take some really marginal projects and put them into production that they might already have on the books. But what about the juniors in that market, Ted? When you look at it, it's so depressed. They're not turning the drills. And that really is, for gold or for silver, in the end, a lot of where the production comes from, correct?
No question. In fact, I would take it one step further. I think this was almost a deliberate, a conscious effort on the part of the majors over the last 10 years or so, just my impression of it, that they kind of outsourced or farmed out their exploration work to the juniors. Let the juniors go find the stuff, and if they find it, we'll come in and buy them at that point. And I think that's been I don't know if it's been formal, but it's been a large part in practice of the mining industry. And for that reason, I think the juniors you got to pick the right ones, of course, but the juniors are a great place to look if you're convinced that the bull market is going to be around for a while, as I believe it will be. So, yeah, I mean, juniors are A-OK.
Let me close with this real quick, Ted. We're running a bit long here, but I just want to talk about silver and its relationship with gold in terms of the performance so far. Obviously, we've had gold go from $250 an ounce roughly to $1,100 an ounce. We're going to round a little bit on both sides. And then also we've had silver. I think the low really was in 1993. It was $3.50 roughly an ounce, and then that's up to $17.30. Roughly the same moves in terms of percentages, probably a bit more for silver, but I think people in the silver side are discouraged because we haven't seen new recent highs on silver with relation to that, say, 2130-ish area that was the previous peak. What would you say to those people holding silver? Because I don't think people really realize when silver goes just how violently it can move and how quickly it can take off. Right, Ted?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that in a strong up move, silver tends to outperform. But I do want to point out that this psychological feeling, and I think it's pretty collective, that somehow silver is stinking up the joint with its performance relative to gold is not quite true. I mean, if you go back as you did, I'll pick numbers. Pick the low at gold at $250, and pick the low at silver at $4, and see where they are today, and they're about the same performance, about 400%, 4 times up on each. Depends on where you pick a starting point or where you pick an ending point. But I think a lot of people, what they do is they're measuring silver from the old high of back 30 years ago of $50 or so, and that's not really a realistic number to measure from. It's so long ago, it was an unusual circumstance, was manipulation to the upside, and I think it was traded over $50 for maybe 10 or 20 minutes. It wasn't a long time that in a lot of transactions at that number. So I think more realistically, you want to measure it from where it was at the last bear market low, and on that basis, they're doing about the same. The fact that silver hasn't kicked in yet, and has still managed to keep pace with gold, which is basically getting all the money, all the headlines, etc., is remarkable. It's just like marking time, but when that time comes, the time of either a resolution on the regulatory side with this big short position or a physical shortage finally hits in earnest, there's no question at that time that silver will vastly outperform gold in my mind, but that's not a knock on gold. Silver people should want gold to go to the moon, because the higher gold goes, the more on a comparable relative basis, the more compelling the silver story is going to become. It's this business of one's better than the other, or this, rooting for one to do bad is kind of silly. It's like let gold go to the moon and silver will leave the solar system.
Ted, also I want to close with your newsletter again, just to remind people, when we get people each week from all over the globe that come in to sign up for that thing. It's been so successful out of the gate. It's just been funny, I think, almost, because it's been a tough time, I think, for a lot of people out there. Let me just say that. And yet you have really just boomed during this early on here with the introduction of this thing. And if people want to do that, obviously we'll have it on the page again. People can go in there and click on some information on how they can subscribe. And what feedback have you been getting on that newsletter? Just in closing, very quickly, Ted.
Well, the feedback has been very positive. We've had some things new just today, as a matter of fact, where I've been able to publicly answer some of the questions that people come up with, and they're darn good questions, and it's proven to be taken very well by the readership, and hope that continues.
All right, Ted. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Have a good weekend, Eric.
Thank you for joining us at KingWorldNews.com. Remember to tune in next week, where we will have the legendary Mr. Gold, Jim Sinclair, as well as Peter Schiff from Euro Pacific Capital, who is also running for Senate in 2010, and another top individual that I will surprise the listeners with this coming week. Also, remember each week to go to our Gold Plus page for the exclusive weekly interview with Ted Butler.